What's going on, everybody? James here from Artofficial Entertainment, and today we're going to be going through the quick start guide for the climbing system in the dynamic parkour tree system version 3. So let's go ahead and dive in. Alright, so I've modified our playground area here. I've added in some just, simple objects that we can use for our climbing demonstration. But all I've done is basically I created this cube and just sized it up to a back wall, added a couple of other cubes, just scaled and resized, and then I did also change the materials. So if you guys are curious, if you go into the materials section with any cube selected and just type in dark, you'll be able to see this prototype grid top dark. So you can use this to be able to kind of set up what I've set up here in the example. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the climb types and different state types that the system is able to control. So it has a basic climbing functionality where we can go on ledges, point, as well as free climbing type states. Now, these are the first three main base climb types. Ledge means that you can move left and right. So on something like this, for example, you'd be able to move left and right. But let's say on something like this that's a little bit smaller, this might only be a point climb, meaning that you're going to be able to go to the point, but you either have to do a transition or a jump to get off of that point. You will not be able to move left or right. And then we also have the free climbing, where something like this, where you have a bit more space, both vertically and horizontally, and are allowing the character to be able to move around the space of that actor. So that's the main three climbing types. Now there is also wall running and balance beam options as well. Now the balance beam has hang and what is referenced as full contact options, but it's basically hang and walking options. Just because I brought up the hang and full contact, that's also something that is applied with the ledge climbing as well. So for example, something like this, where it's wide enough or long enough that we could maybe put our feet at the bottom and move along that area, where something like this, we would just have to hang off of this top area. So the system is able to now differentiate between these two types, but is only able to do that for ledge climbing at the current moment. Now, how to be able to set these up for climbing actors, for example, is any actor that you have selected, if you go into the details, go into search and type in tag, you can see we have this actor tag option. Now, if we add two elements into here, we can set the first one to just be climb. Now, this is necessary for point, free, beam, and ledge types, and not necessary for wall running. But we're going to set this first tag to climb, and the second one is going to be whatever type we want to do. So, for example, if we were to type in just ledge, all lowercase, then now this is a ledge. If we were to type in point, now it's a point. So you can assign actors through tags and just simple commands. So again, we can set this to beam if we wanted to, so we can kind of assign these in various ways. And a way that you can do multiple at once is, let's say we wanted all three of these actors to be a ledge type. Then if I go into the actors tag with all of these selected, making sure there's no element. So if I had an element in here just to show you, and then I select on this, you'll see it says multiple values. So we have to make sure that they're all the same, but so long as they are, we can highlight them, add the two tag options, type in climb in the first one, and then in the second one, we'll put ledge, because this is going to be a ledge type. And then this one, we can do the same thing, add two tags. First one's going to be climb, and then this one would be point, right? Because we're not allowing that left and right movement. And then I also have over here this, which is going to be our balance beam that we're going to be using. So for this one, what I'll do is I'll add two tags on this one. First one's going to be climb, and then the second one is going to be beam. So to label anything as a balance beam, it's just BEAM, beam. Now the tags listings will be available inside of the documentation, so if you ever need to get a refresher as to what tags are available and what they reference, you can always go back and take a look at that information to be able to get the refresher. So now that we've got a kind of a good understanding as to how to set up objects, let's go ahead and make sure our character has what we need as well. Because a couple things we're going to want to add to our character blueprint. So for me, that's going to be the third person blueprints and then BP third person character. Now, if I go ahead and navigate up to my movement section here. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that if you're using anything other than the first or third person template, or if you have your own custom movement input that isn't using the similar control right vector and then control forward vector type of setup here, whatever it is that you have set for the world direction on the add input, you're going to want to make sure to copy that. So for example, this is left and right, this is forward and back. So if you have something different than what is shown on the screen here, just highlight them and then Control D to duplicate them, because we're going to save them. Now, by default, though, if you are using the third or first person template, these will match to what's going to be in the function we're about to add by default. But we're actually going to add an override to the input. So now with those off to the side, we can go ahead and just highlight the left, right, and the forward and back. Now, before we delete, though, we'll just mark X as being the left and right value and Y as being the forward and back value. And now we'll just press delete. Now, we can also take these two out. We don't need these comment boxes. And then we're going to grab a reference to our Parkour system and type in Parkour input, and you'll see the Parkour input override function. And we'll plug this up off of triggered and as well as completed. And then the X value will go into the right and the Y value will go into forward. And then if we highlight them like you just saw and press Q after highlight them like this and then do this, you can actually align them with Q. So it makes a really nice, easy cleanup. So what this is going to do, if we double click and open this up, now if you're using, like I said, if you need to replace, if you take these and then Control C and then double click to open up the actual Parkour input override function. If we take a look here, we've got a left, right, and a forward, back, and each one of these world directions is built off of a selector. If you see here, we got a none option on both of these. Now this is going to be the default control that's going to be used. And as you can see here, it's using the exact same setup as the third and first person character systems. But like I said, if you're using something different, you would just take whatever that value is that you had copied and then Control V and just make sure to take this owner reference and plug it into the target. So this way it'll know where it is that it's supposed to be applying the movement to. But that's really all you would have to do. But again, if you're using the first or third person templates, you do not need to do this. Now from here, we're going to pull off the dynamic parkour trace system and we're going to get active parkour state. So there's going to be more states that are going to be added in the future. But for right now, we're just going to pull off of this and go enum equal. And you're going to see we have none as well as ledge climb, point climb, free climb, balance beam, and wall run. So these are all the current active states. So if we go and pull a branch in and the execution pins like that, and then if equal to none is true, we're not going to do anything off of this. But if it's false, meaning that it's in any one of the states, we could have also used a not equal, but I just like using this because then I can put the dynamic parkour trace system, copy it, pull off, and we're going to do an update active parkour state data, and then look that up off of false. And it just kind of keeps everything localized nice and clean. So that's why I like using the none, because then I can use the false option and then put the parkour system reference right here. Now for the right and forward inputs, we are going to want to make sure to pass these in. So we're going to take right into right and forward into forward, and then we'll compile and save. Now there's one last thing that we're going to want to do. Inside of our interfaces section, if we open this up, you're going to see the state reset execution. If we double click, this is going to give us the ability to reset some values that are going to be overridden during any of the states. This includes climbing, wall running, balance beams. So there's a lot of different things that can be overridden, and this particular event gets fired off whenever one of those states comes to an end. So what we're going to do is, if we pull off of our character movement here, pull it into our graph, we're going to want to reset a few things. The first and primary thing being the gravity. So we're going to do a set gravity scale. And now you would just want to set this to whatever your project's default gravity scale is, which mine is 1.75. But you can also, if you have a custom gravity defining function, you can put that in here as well. Now it also overrides all rotations. So this means orient rotation to movement, use controller desired rotation, as well as use controller rotation, yaw, pitch, and roll. So whatever control rotation values you want to use for your project, just make sure to reassign them here. For me, I'm just using the orient rotation to movement. So we'll go ahead and plug that up just like this. There is also a modification to the walk speed whenever you're in a beam walk state. So if you're using beam walk, we're going to want to make sure to set the max walk speed. And then we're also going to pull out the character movement here and get the walk braking deceleration, because it modifies both of these. So for me, my max walk speed is going to be 600. I'm going to make sure to uncheck that boolean there. My braking deceleration is 1350. These are just, personal project preferences. Now, outside of this, if you're going to be using flying in your game under any circumstances, you're going to want to also grab the max fly speed and the fly braking deceleration as well. So we'll get the max of the fly speed, and then we'll set max braking, set braking deceleration, and we'll get the flying variant here. So you're going to want to make sure to reset these values, or set them, I guess, to whatever your project needs are. right off of this function, because now we've reset our gravity scale, our orientation for movement, as well as our walk speed and fly speed. So I'm going to set this to 600, braking is going to be 0, and there we go. All right, perfect. So there we go. So now we've got a start to our reset here, and we've also called the primary overrides and input updates. Now let's go ahead and we're going to add some of the anim selectors in ahead of time, just so we can get these out of the way. So I'm going to move the input events over off to the side here, and we're going to open up under the interfaces, action events. We're going to grab the climb start, climb jump, and the climb transition, because we're going to take a look at each one of these in this video. Now we're going to be starting with the climb start action. So we'll grab our parkour trace system, pull off, type in anim selection, and you'll see we have the climb start option here. Now we can also, I'm just going to grab a new reference for each one. So now we'll go with pull off and get anim selection. And this one is going to be for the climb jump action. And then one more time, pull off, anim selection, and get for the climb transition actions. So there we go. So now we have the anim selector and action events in our character for climb jumps, starts, and transitions. Now, just to make this a little bit quicker, I'm going to right or click on this make array, and I'm just going to do Control D, and Control D. Because this way I just kind of put one for each one of these, and I don't have to type out and, search it and do all that crap multiple times. What we're going to do is we're going to take the climb jump and transition actions, and we're going to come back to the values we're going to use for the compare. But for the climb start, if we pull back on the dynamic parkour trace system here, I'm just going to use the height value. So we get the height F, and we'll plug that into the make array. And then we'll go ahead and compile and save. And now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the warp setup for a simple climb start type of action. All right, so for climb start warp setups here, if I go to my animation folder, I've got this wall run up here. And if I open this up, you're going to notice that it kind of just runs up the wall and then he attaches to the ledge. So we can actually use this to be able to enter in sort of like a ledge type state. So if we right click and create the anim montage, this way we can use it into our selectors. And then we'll open up the montage here. Now, before we actually get started on the warp setup here, if I go over to this actor and I press the space key, you can see that the yellow spot and the red have been showing up here. So we got a height and an initial point. Now with that in mind, that means that we can use the height as our endpoint, but we could use initial as well if we wanted to. Because as you can see here, the character is kind of starting at the base of the wall and then he climbs up to the target point. So if we add a couple of notify tracks into here, go and disable the enable auto blend out, right click add notify state, motion warp with offset, and we look at where he kind of gets his first attachment to the front of the wall. So something like right there. And then if we open up the root motion modifier here, we can set the target to be initial, ignore z-axis and warp rotation uncheck, primary offsets, and we'll set the forward offset to be -50. We might actually set that, we'll go -80. And now from here, we'll go negative notified state and motion warp with offset again, line those up, and we'll look at where he hits his target point. Now you can see that here he's in his land, but the hands are still moving up and down, but in this frame, they lock in place. So that's a good indicator as to where the root motion ends, and we can use that as the end point of our window. Now, if we uncheck ignore z-axis, we want to keep warp rotation checked though, and we're going to go up into the offsets. Now, your offsets are going to change based off of, the type of animations you're using, the type of character you're using, retargeting. There's a whole bunch of different values that can come into what would change offset values that would be used. However, if we take a look here, we can use the forward offset and up offset to bring our character back and down so he's on the ledge. But what these values are going to change. So for me, with these animations, so if using the same animations in the UE4 character, we can set the forward offset to -46 and the up offset to -125, as these are the values that I found to be the most accurate for this animation. So with that in mind, we can use that, but we also want to make sure we assign the character to attach to the actual normal of the wall. So we go to orientation use, you can see we have primary target normal, and we can use the height of that to be able to make sure our target area for rotation is going to be the actual wall area. And that's why we make sure to check warp rotation. And now we just need to make sure to set our warp target point to height. Perfect. Okay, so now we've set up all of our main warp stuff. If we right click, add notify, and get the reset parkour action here. We're going to do something a little different with this one though. We're going to set the blend time to 0.2, but we're going to also go under where it says state control options. Now, whether you're doing a climb start, a climb jump, or a transition, if it's going to end once this montage ends, if you're trying to ensure that it's going to stay in a climb or state type of some kind, we need to make sure that activate state is set to true. Otherwise, if you don't, it's going to drop out of the state if you were in one, or it's not going to actually trigger the state at all. So under the state control options, we just click on activate state and good to go. So now if I just save this, minimize, we're going to go to the content browser, DPTS assets, selection tables, from climb this time, and we're going to open up under the climb start selection table. So inside of the climb start selection table here, we can add a new row, and inside of this row here, we can add some action selection values. Now, if I hit add on element, we can see that the index here is very similar to the drops and vault type action selection. So we have a name, we have some compare values, and the modification array here that we can add to either randomize or specifically select. But the one thing that's different in all of the climbing type action types is if we open up under the action modifications here, obviously we have this primary modification here, but we also have this state match restriction as well. So the way that this works is that if we add an element into here, open up the index, you can see that we have a primary type, which is all of our main types of climbing and states. So we have wall run, balance beam, free climb, point climb, and ledge climb. Now, because of the fact that ledge climb and balance beams both have hang and full contact options, we can also assign the full contact or hang variations in here as well. Now, just like with all the other modifiers, what this is going to do is make sure that whatever montage you put in this listing, it's only going to be selected if this target matches. And this is where you're going to. So for example, this would be a ledge full contact. This would be ledge hang. So if we wanted to make it so one was only available, or this animation was only selectable during ledge full contact, then all we need to do is that, just a simple matching game. And then we can add more than one element too. So if you have more than one type that you want it to be used for, you can just, assign the listings inside of here. And always remember that you can shift right click and then shift left click to copy the values from one index to another. Now, we also have the primary modifications here, but these are a little different than the ones that you've seen for like the vaulting and drop actions. Here we have the sprint and sidewall options, but then it just goes right into from drop off, and that's it. There's no enclosure options. So with this one, we can use sidewalls left and right to be able to trigger certain, climb start actions. If you had a climb start that you wanted to use, that was a tic-tac action, although I do show a way to set this up inside of the more detailed guide. But I just want to note that you can use sidewall left and right to help trigger certain actions. And then we also have the from drop off, which is where if you were trying to set up a climb like down to this area here. So if you were running across and you wanted to drop down to this spot here, that would be a from drop off. And just like with the other actions here, we can set a compare value as well as a secondary condition to compare against. What we've set up here is going to be more of a ledge full contact, but I can also set it for point climb full contact, because now we're just going to set this up for the animation we're actually, we did the montages for. And you'll remember that inside of the character, I had set up mine to be only with the height, so that's one value, and it's the height. So if I go back to the climb start selector here, inside of the compare values, I'm just going to add one element, and we're going to see if it's between 50 and 250. We're going to use this animation. Actually, I'll set it to 350 because I think my climb actor is a little higher up. And then for the montage here, all we need to do is grab that wall run up montage that we made and then save. So now if we go back to our character really quickly, click on the dynamic parkour trace system, secondary settings, allowed actions, and then make sure that climb start is checked. Now, one thing I do recommend as well is in the climb start actions here, we're going to change the priority from compare value to state match type. This is something that I recommend for all of these action types. So we're going to switch all of these to state match type. But this is just going to ensure that if you have multiple values of different match types that you want to select, it's going to filter this first. It will then go through modifications and then into compare values, but it's just a way to be able to control things and get a bit of a better result, at least from my experience. Now, if we minimize, hit play, and we go up to our climb actor here, which remember, we named this ledge, and if I go up to it, you can see that we are now on the area. If I move left and right, if I hit W and S, it does nothing. But if I go to the edge of this object here, you can see that we are no longer being allowed to move any further. So this is where the actor is being constrained to the area. And now let's take a look at how that constraint works and how to be able to modify some things really quick. Now let's go ahead and we're going to go into our content folder, DPTS assets, selection tables, and we're going to open up under settings and then the DPTS settings selection table. Now we're also going to go into our character blueprint here, click on the dynamic parkour trace system, go into the details panel, and under the secondary settings, under the debug settings, we're going to open up the trace search options, and then the selection here, I'm actually just going to take both of those out, and I'm going to set it to only be the climb validations. Now what these are going to be the actual traces that are going to be running to make sure that we are in a proper state of climbing while we're actually moving along a climb area. So if we open up in the settings here, we'll see a from climb state, and then if we open up the primary settings, you're going to see several indexes. Now what this is preset and pre-made settings that are assigned to each of the primary types of climbing or traversal. Now these can be changed, evaluated, removed, and completely remade. It's entirely up to you. But the way that the climb settings works is that we have the active space validation settings, jump target settings, secondary settings, and speed settings. And each one of these indexes is the exact same listing. The only difference is that for this listing, it's being tied to specifically ledge climb and point climb full contact. Whereas if I open up under index 1, you can see that this one is ledge climb hang. And if I open up index 2, this one is for balance beam hang. So this allows you to be able to set various settings based off the different types to be able to create different behaviors. But we're going to be looking at the validation settings here. So let's open those up, hit play, and we're going to go on top of our climb area here. Now the first thing to point out is you're going to see that there's a trace going around the character, a little bit of a taller box trace going in front tracing our object, and then we also have those two little line traces that are going. Those little line traces are getting our active target area. The one that's going around our character is just making sure our character's space is valid. And then the taller trace that's running left and right, you can see as I switch sides. If I go to the edge here, this is the one that's actually checking to make sure that our space is still there. So if I were to set this validation offset to, let's say 80 instead of 40, and I go left and then I go back here, you can see that it stops me substantially farther away. So you can change the size of that search. You can also change the size of the character search as well. You can change the trace distances, and there's a whole bunch of things that you can do from here. But just remember that each one of these is based off of the active type. So it's going to be for point climb or ledge climb full contact. It's going to be with these going to be selected when we're in a ledge climb hang, which again is going to be like the difference between this object and this object. And also just to point out as well, if I close the primary settings here, you'll see subtype settings. Open these up. The first option here is the ledge climb, and this is going to be the value that actually represents. So if it's greater than 80, it's going to be a full contact. In other words, something like this. If it's less than 80 though, it's going to be this. So you can reduce this value if you wanted to make sure that it's only like 40, so like smaller areas, but realistically it's entirely up to you. I found 80 to be at least a good starting point, but it's basically just this frontal distance. And then for the index 1 here, we also have one for balance beams. Now that one is a little more complex, but just to simplify it, realistically, if you were trying to, let's say this is a beam, right? And you were in a hang position and you wanted to swing forward. Well, this value is going to control, in this position, we would swing from a hang to another hang because you wouldn't be able to get up on top of it from there. However, if it's down lower and you were hanging off of it from here, then the difference in height here, this value, the difference here, that's going to be what controls if it's a full contact. In other words, a balance beam walk goes on top of it, or a hang where it's going to try to get to the edge of the item. So this is just basically a controlling from where you are to where the target is. What is that distance you want to be able to make it so it goes into a hang or a full contact, and aka full contact being walk. Now, on top of being able to modify the ledge options, we can also modify the speed settings as well. I'm sorry, not the ledge options, the trace options. So you can see that right now it's set to max speed of 150 and 1200. If I set this to, let's say, 350 on the speed, and I walk over to my ledge actor here, you can see that we are now, oh, I think I modified that on the wrong value here. So we'll go ahead and put that back. So if I set the value under here to 350, and I walk over to the actor here, you can see that we're moving much faster left and right than we would have before. That's really it when it comes to the settings. You guys can just play around with different distances on the validations, different distances on like how the search size is going to work. I do recommend keeping the 15 value because it makes it so that way if you go on things that are a little bit more angled, like this, for example, or like this, it's going to make it so that way as you go down, it doesn't miss the object. But, you know, again, play around with things as you like and see what feels good. Now, let's take a look at setting up some animation blueprint stuff. So this way we can actually make some animations happen when we're on a climb area. So if for me, I'm going to go into my tutorial assets folder, animation, and then I have this tutorial ABP here, which I'm going to be using for the example. So I'm going to double click, open it up, and you can see it's a very basic blueprint. We have initialization where we're getting our character and our character movement, and then it's just going in and setting some movement data, simple velocity, speed, direction, and then a falling boolean. So nothing really crazy going on. It's a very basic blueprint. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a new function, and we're going to call this set Parkour data. Now, one thing I do want to note really quickly though, is we want to make sure we have that character reference. And if you want, you can, usually you should have the movement reference as well, but I just want to note that these two things are going to be needed to fully follow along with what I'm going to show you. Now, it's just to your character though, not to the third person, just to clarify. But for me, I'm going to grab my character reference and pull it into that set Parkour function that we just made. And then if we pull off of the character here, we can type in dynamic parkour trace system, and you're going to see the get dynamic parkour trace system here. Now, if we right click on this, we can actually convert this to a validated get. This way we'll make sure that it's valid before it tries to do anything. And if it is valid, we can go ahead and promote it to a variable. Now we're going to take that parkour reference there, and we're going to pull off, and we're going to grab a few things from this. The first one is going to be the active parkour state. So we got the active parkour state, and we also want to get the active parkour substate as well, because this is going to be the hang or full contact variation of whatever you're currently in. Now, this next part is entirely optional. However, it's because, so if I open up my my ledge movement here, this is a 1D blend space that I've created with a left and right movement option for my character. But the blend that I've created is just off of a right input, -1, +1 value. So if I'm going -1, I'm going to the left. If I'm going +1, I'm going to the right. If it's 0, then it's idle. This is just a very basic setup that I like to use. Now, one thing I do recommend as well to be able to help smooth out your blend spaces is that under this sample smoothing, under weight speed, if you set this to a value like around 6, this will actually really smooth out your blend spaces and make things a little more functional. This way there's less snapping inside of your blend space. But if you're going to follow and set up a similar blend space setup, if we pull off the parkour system, we can actually grab the right input here and we can get the right input. And there's also a forward input here as well, because we want to use this for our beam walk, which if I scroll up a little bit here, you can see we have the beam walk blend space, where it's using the forward input this time instead of the right and going forward and backwards based off of that directionality. So with these in mind, I can go ahead and just right click now, and we're going to promote each of these to a variable, and then we'll just set them in sequence. So we'll go from the active state and then substate and then get the inputs. Now what we're going to do is go into our anim graph. Now, you can see here I just have a simple locomotion and then the default slot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unhook my locomotion state machine. And then off of the default slot source here, we're going to do a blend pose by bool. So you'll see this one right here. Now, the Boolean value we're going to give it is going to be if our active parkour state, drag it into the graph here, and then pull off enum equal to none. So if the enum of our parkour active state is equal to none, then we're going to go into just our standard locomotion. However, if it's false, then we want to go into something that's going to be like a climbing state or wall running or something like that, right? So with a right click, we can type in state machine, and we'll just name this parkour states, and then plug it in off of false. Now if we open it up, off the entry, pull off, add state, and I'll just name this again parkour states. I'll just be a little redundant here. And then we'll double click to open up that state. Now the way I like to do this, now this is entirely optional, is I like to just pull off of the result and put everything into one little slot. So if we go in and we type in blend by active parkour, blend by parkour states, you'll see this one right here. And we can actually right click on the active enum value, go into the binding, and then we can bind our active parkour state to this. And if we right click, you'll see we have ledge climb, right click and point climb, right click and free climb, right click beam climb, and wall run. So we have all the options right here now set up into a single blend. Now, I only have hanging, ledge, and beam walk set up just for the examples here, but I'm going to grab my beam walk and put it in, my hang, and my ledge movement. Now, for ledge climbing, right, we have the ability to go between hanging and ledge movements. So what we can also do is if we right-click and blend by substate, you'll see this s_substates blend poses. So we can use this as a secondary selector. Now, if we right-click on the active enum value, set the binding to our parkour substate, and then we'll just right-click full contact, and then right-click hang. This way we can get those output poses. And all we need to do from here is just put hang into hang, and then for full contact, into the ledge movement. And then we'll right-click on the input for the right input, and then select right input. Right-click, click binding, and this one's also going to be right input. Bam. So there we go. Now we'll take this and we're going to duplicate it. So this one's going to be for ledge, and this one is going to be for balance beam. Now for the beams, I like to use the beam walk for just the full contact, obviously. But then we can actually use the same hang movement for the beam hang. We don't actually need a separate animation set. But again, you can use any animations or any combinations of things that you want. This is just more an example of how to be able to set things up. Now from here, we'll just go into the forward input on the beam walk here, go to the binding, and make sure to bind that forward input. Now for the point climb, the one thing I like to do is just take the ledge idle, which is, let's see, this one right here. So you can see he's just kind of like chilling in place. So we can use that to be able to actually be our point animation. So we'll just drag that in, hook it up off of point, but do make sure that loop animation is checked. Otherwise it'll just play once and then it'll just stop. So now if we compile and save, we now have a basic setup here where we've got some ledge climb options, balance beam options, point climb, and then the free climb one is just, you can set up a standard blend space for that and use a similar like right and forward for the left, right, up, and down options. But that's why I'm just kind of showing it with these ones because it's, as I keep saying, it's just a lot of doing the same thing in a little bit of a different way. But if we go and we minimize, hit play, and we go over to this object now, climb up onto it. Oh, right, okay. We need to go back to our animation blueprint really quick. Almost forgot. So we're going to go into the event graph here, and we're going to make sure our set parkour data here is being triggered off of the blueprint update animation. So plug it in just like that to make sure it's actually getting the updated data. And then if we hit play now, walk over to this item, you can see now we are in our actual idle. And if I move left or right, it's going to move left or right. Now, because we messed with the settings there, it does look a little weird. So I'm going to go back to the settings here, set this back to 150. And then if we hit play, it should look a lot more normal now. So there we go. So now we're moving left, we're moving right, and now we've got some movement going. But you can see we get to the edge, the character kind of keeps moving. There's a quick trick we can do with this. If we go back into our animation blueprint, go into the set parkour data, just right click and type in select float, get 2 of them. Now what we're going to do is we're going to plug for the right and forward inputs. We're going to plug these in, and then their respective input values, we're going to plug in off of the option B. Now this is where the character movement comes into play. So if you have this, you want to drag it into your graph, pull off, and we're going to want to get the movement mode and see if enum equal none. So if movement mode is equal to none, which is what's happening when we reach to the edge. So right now, as we're going along the edge, it's flying. But the second we reach the edge here, it's none, which is what stops the character movement. Which means we can use this to be able to set the value to 0 instead. So by just plugging in the condition here into the pick A option, we can now, if we hit play, go over to the edge after we climb up, and you'll see that the character stops moving immediately. So this way we can use that to be able to stop the animations. Now, on top of being able to just set some basic values for animation control, there's a couple of other things we can add into our animation blueprint here to give us some more functionality. If we take our parkour system, pull it at the end here, and then we pull off, and actually we don't need to use that, we can use the active parkour states here, actually. And we're going to pull off of that and see if enum equal to none, and then get a branch. So at the end of our kind of setting of conditions here, we're going to hook the branch condition up, seeing if our parkour state is equal to none. If that is true, if we pull off the dynamic parkour trace system here, we can pull off and type in active beam, and you'll see active beam search. And if we put this up off of false, what this will do is make it so that way we can actually walk across beam areas and it will automatically trigger the state. And that's actually, we want to put that off of true, I apologize. So if it's equal to none true, then we want to do a search. Now, if I just take this off here, and we go over, you'll see that we have this item here that I was talking about earlier. And if we set up the tag already, so we got climb and beam. Now, before I actually add that in, if I go ahead and just play from here, you can see that nothing happens. I can walk over it, but it doesn't lock me in place. There's, I can walk right off of it, and it doesn't even trigger my animations. However, just by adding this one function off of true, if I minimize and now play from here, we're going to get a much different result. As you can see, we have now a beam walk being triggered, and if we just continue to walk forward, it automatically puts us back into our standard state. And we can do the same thing here, gets to the end, and same thing. Now we can also go backwards and it will disable as well. So this allows us to be able to automatically walk, or you can also even jump on top of the beam areas as well. So something like this, and you can see where it triggered. Now we can also go ahead and jump on the beams as well, something like this, and you can see where he kind of jumped onto the edge and just keep walking. And that time my character turned around, so that's why he's now facing the other direction, because it's going to try to align it not only to the longest area that's been found on the beam, but also try to align it to the character's facing direction. So there's a couple things that do happen, but yeah. Now with the active beam search in mind, there's another thing that we can call in here as well, but it requires another piece to be set up. But there's a way that we can actually make it so our character, if we wanted to put something like a rounded surface, so if I add a cylinder into our play area here, and if I go into the transform here, I'm going to lock the scale, and I'm going to set the scale to 10. So this way we have a nice big area that we could possibly climb onto. Now if I go into the tag section here, go ahead and add the 2 tags, and we'll set this one to climb, and we'll just set this to the type of ledge. Now if I go ahead and hit play, we can go ahead and we can climb on top of it. But The second we start moving left and right, you'll notice that the character doesn't really rotate with it, doesn't move with it. It's just kind of, we're just kind of there. Well, there's an easy way to fix that, but it also requires a bit of a setup of offsets. So when we set up the climb start, I talked a little bit about making sure that you know what your offsets are for your animations. So inside of the animation here, we have for the actual target, we have set under the primary offsets, and this is just for that climb start that we set up earlier. We can see that the offsets are set to -46 and -125. However, under above the root motion modifier here, you can see this use state warp overrides. So if we go to our character, into the dynamic parkour trace system here, we're going to collapse the, in the details panel here under system, we're going to collapse the secondary settings, open up overrides, and you'll see the state warp overrides option here. Now what this is the ability to set specific overrides that are going to be assigned to certain climb types. Like for example, this one is primary type of ledge, subtype full contact. But the offset that's been assigned to that is that -46, -125. So if I were to go back to the animation, right, and we clear these offsets, which is the exact same as the ones that are in the character. But if I make these 0, and then I make this option true, so the use state warp overrides, if I just check that to be true, and then we go and we do the same thing. We go up to our area, hit the space bar. You can see that the exact same thing happened. There was no difference, even though it no longer has the offsets inside of the animation, but it's pulling them instead from the character and looking at what the actual type of climbing that area is going to be using. So there's different types of offsets for the different types of states that can be used. So it's something to very much keep in mind is that we have hang options, we have full contact options, and a whole bunch of other things. So you want to make sure that you have these set up and know what these are before you start initiating the actual transform update, which is what we're about to do. But I wanted to point this out first because the transform update is going to pull from these state warp overrides to be able to adjust the character. So it's something very, very important to make sure that you have these defined first. Now, if we go over into our character blueprint though, or I'm sorry, animation blueprint though, and go back into our set parkour state function, off of the false here, so if our active parkour state is equal to none, is true, we're doing the beam search, right? But if it's false, in other words, we're in another state. We're going to grab our parkour trace system pull off and we're going to get update transform, and you'll see the active climb transform adjustment. So this is something that's going to rotate and also keep the actor's position front, back, up, and down from the climb area. So with that in place, I can actually go over to this object now, and you'll see, all right, sorry about the cut there, guys. I was trying to figure out why it wasn't properly working when I was doing the adjustment, and I realize now why. If we go back into our DPTS settings selection table, I had adjusted the validation offset from 40 to 80, just to kind of show you guys. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you do adjust the validation offset to be a larger value than 40, it is a good idea if you're trying to use rounded objects to increase the primary validation trace distance. But in this instance, I'm just going to reduce the validation offset, bring it back in from 80 to 40. And then now if we go up onto the actor here, you can see we are now rotating around it. And we are moving and staying within a line of it, and it's doing exactly what it should be doing. So this is just something to keep in mind is that if you adjust that offset by a little bit too much and you notice that it's missing when you try to go around, just increase the forward value and that will fix the issue. Now, another thing that's pretty cool too is that for these actors here, right, we've set both of these to be the type of ledge. And we have also set up a ledge, full contact, and hang animations. So if I actually go up to this object here, you can see we'll start off in ledge. But if I go over to here, all right, so the system is so large I do forget about a certain thing sometimes. And I've done so many of these videos now, so I apologize, guys. We go back into our character really quickly. Under the parkour state search options, in the state transform correction allow listing. So this is in a blocker listing, allowing you to set which type of actions you actually want to do the live transform adjustment on. So if we open these up, we can see we got the ledge climb full contact, we got point climb full contact, and we also have the balance beam hang. However, we do not have the ledge climb hang. So if we add an element into here, go to the primary type, set it to ledge climb hang, and then minimize and hit play. This should work just as intended now. So we'll go left and then we'll go right, go here, and there we go. So you can see that it adjusted the actual position. So this way we're actually getting a nice adjustment where it's going in from hang and full contact nice and smoothly. So As long as you make sure to assign those values and make sure to assign whatever types you want to use it for. So if you don't want to use it for ledge, climb, hang, you can just, keep that option removed. Or you can remove or add any values you want for this to actually be used for. All right, now let's go ahead and switch gears a little bit. Let's start talking about some of the climb, jump, and climb transition setup stuff. So inside of the character blueprint here, if we open it up, we had set up the climb, transition, and climb, jump actions in here, but we haven't given any values in. So we're going to start with the climb, jump. We'll move the transition out of the way. And as I had said in the first video, there's certain values that are specific to certain actions. So in this case, if we pull off the parkour system and type in climb, jump, we can see we have this climb, jump distance. This is a standard vector distance value that we can use to see how far we are from point A to point B. And then inside of the climb transition one here, what I like to use is generally going to just be length. So we'll actually go ahead and just set this up really quickly. If you pull off the parkour system here, we're going to type in length. What this is going to do is allow you to be able to easily differentiate between vault and mantle selections, and the rest it can really be selected through other options, which we're going to cover here in a moment when we get to the actual animation selectors in the data table. So now with the climb, jump execution and the climb transition actions inside of our character and all set up, let's go ahead and compile, save, we'll minimize, and we're going to go to the content folder, DPTS assets, selection tables, from climb, and we're going to start with the climb, jump selection table. Now we'll go ahead and add a row in here, and we'll add a row inside of that index. And now as you can see here, the face value of this looks exactly the same. We've got some compare values, we got a montage selection, and then some action modifications, and we can name the action as well. Now for this, it's going to be pretty much exactly the same as the other ones. We can add a compare value, and this is a jump, right? So I want to go between maybe 50 and 350 for that jump distance. But if we open up the action modification option here, you're going to notice that there's a couple of differences. Now, first off, we have this input restriction. Now, let's say, for example, if we were trying to set up a 4-way directional jump where we can go up, down, left, right, maybe even diagonal options, right? Well, you can assign each animation to be according to a direction. So we have forward, backwards, left, right, and then also the diagonal directions. So it'll check what the input direction is using the scalar value, and then you can use this to be able to match to an animation type. Now, if we open up the state match restrictions here, though, unlike with the climb start, you're going to notice we have a target as well as an active, because when we're doing a climb start, we aren't in an active type. We're kind of on the ground running along. We're trying to enter into an active type. But once we're there, we can then filter between what we are currently in and what has been found for the anim to be selected. So for example, in this case, right, if we were to try to do a jump downwards, right, from let's say this point to this, or from this point to this point, and we didn't want to use the climb jumps on hang targets, well, we could just make it so that way the active is going to be, let's say for example, ledge climb full contact, as well as maybe point climb full contact, right? And then for our target, we can set the exact same values. So this way it'll make sure that the active is only going to, or it's only going to select the animation if the found is either ledge climb full contact or point climb, and the target is exactly the same. And the active is exactly the same. But you can obviously mix and match these as much as you want, depending on how you want the animations to be selected. But again, it's just a simple matching of like what you're currently in, what has been found, what montage do you want to be selected under those conditions. Now, we also have this jump behind option, which I'm not really going to be covering in this series. If you want to learn about the jump behind option, the way that you can jump behind 2 targets behind the character, this is covered inside of the more in-depth series. So I'm just going to note that I'm not really going to cover the jump behind options. Now, once you've assigned, how you want things to work, we only need to put in a montage into here. So if I go and look, for example, I've got a ledge jump action. And that's right, I haven't set the montage up yet. So actually we'll minimize this and we'll go to my animations folder and then climbing, and there we go. Okay, so we got this ledge jump up. So we're going to use just this single animation just for an example, but you're going to do basically the exact same thing for down, left, right, diagonal. It's all the same. So if I go and I just right click on the ledge jump up, create the anim montage, open her up, and just like what we've done before, uncheck the enable auto blend out, add a couple notify tracks, and then we'll right click, add notify state, motion warp with offset. And what we're going to do is look at when he kind of jumps off the actor. So I'd say right about here is going to be a good spot. And then we're going to look at where the hands stop moving. So right about here. And then we'll define that as our window. So, we're just going to have it move from point A to point B. And point B we're going to set as the height. And then ignore z-axis, warp rotation. Actually, I'm sorry, warp rotation, keep check. Ignore z-axis, uncheck. And then for the orientation, we're just going to set it to the primary target normal, so make sure that our actor is aligned with our target. And then instead of using the offsets here, we're just going to check the use state warp overrides. Bam. So now we don't have to mess with the offsets. And then we're going to go to the end here, right click, add notify, and then reset parkour action. Set the blend time to be like 0.2. And then under the state control options, because we're going to be jumping from one climb point to another, we want to make sure activate state is checked. So now if we hit save, go back to our climb jump selection table, we can add that animation we just created right into there. So we got the ledge jump up here. Now because I'm using the up, I'm going to set the input restriction to forward, and then we can save. Now one thing to note too is that you can do jumps from wall running, ledge climb, point climb, balance beams, as well as free climb. So there's no restriction on jumps. You're just going to want to maybe set up different targets and stuff as I had shown in the settings. But if we go up to this actor here, and then I go over and I hit W and the spacebar. Oh, that's right, we haven't enabled it. So let's go back to our character here. And inside the dynamic parkour trace system here, we're just going to want to go under the system, secondary settings, allowed actions, and make sure that climb jump is checked. So now if we hit play, go up to the same actor, do the same thing. And then just press W and space. There we go. You can see that now he's jumping upwards. So we just created that nice jump upwards to where he can go to a target. Now you could do the same thing that I just showed you, just assigning the height target, and you can go down, left, right, however you want to go. But the way that the jumps work is that generally speaking, you're going to be using the height, and you're going to want to make sure that that normal is assigned. So instead of our animation here, you can see that the primary target normal is set for the offset. So, and you can set up a variety of climb jump animations utilizing all of the different stuff that I had shown you guys here with the selectors here, setting up different target types, different active types. And there's also an entirely more dynamic solution to this as well that is shown inside of the more detailed the more detailed system overview. But this gives you like the base understanding of how to be able to get climb jump started, is that you only need to just make sure that you have some sort of state match for target and active, maybe some input values for the comparisons, and then give it an animation, and then just tell it where to go, just like how we did with every other action that we've set up so far. So now let's go ahead and take a look at setting up a mantle for a transition action. Now transitions you can do a lot of things with that. Let's go ahead and set up the animation really quickly. So I have this ledge climb up monkey here that we can use. So you can see it starts in a full contact pose, climbs up, and goes on top of the area. So we can right click, create the anim montage, and then we'll open it up. Now one thing to bear in mind is that when you're doing any transition action, the height is not going to actually be used, which is why I wanted to do this one more towards the end, so I can take a little bit more time to talk about how this works. So if we add a couple of notify tracks here, and then we also make sure to enable auto blend out uncheck. Now, when you're doing a transition, so like for here, he's climbing up, right? The system is going to get the length, it's going to get a bunch of information, but it's not going to get the height point because you're on the height point, right? So if we right click, add notify state, motion warp with offset, and we look at where he kind of climbs up and plants. So we'll say maybe right about here. What we can actually do is define this window, but instead of using height, under the root motion modifier, we can set active target. So we can actually use our active climb area as a point to start in, and then give it offsets. So in this example, I'm not going to use the state warp overrides, but I'm going to bring the forward offset -46, but we're going to keep the up offset at 0, because we're basically letting him go from a contact, plant there, and he's going to climb up, push himself down, and this root bone is going to be kind of aligned with our target area now. Now we're just going to make sure to uncheck ignore Z-axes, and you can uncheck warp rotation for this as well. It's not needed to have it checked, but it's entirely up to you. Now, because we are doing a mantle action, which this is also for vault actions, anything that's going to be doing a from climb state to just a standard walk state, right? We're going to want to right click, add notify, and we want to get that find land target because we're actually going to be going to a landing point right about here. So we'll take the trace start target and we're going to set it to active target. Search start offset, we'll set the up offset to be about 20. And then the Z search distance, just like with all the other mantles, we'll go 60 and maybe go with like a minimum of 30, maximum of 90. And then we can just right click again, add notify state, motion warp with offset, and then open up the root motion modifier, and then we'll just set this to that land target that we just created. Now we're going to right click, add notify, and then reset parkour action, setting the blend time to 0.2, but this time we're not going to check the activate state in the state control options because we're going to be going from a climb to a standard walk using that mantle. So we want this to reset, so we're just going to leave that unchecked, and if it's already in a state, it's going to reset itself on its own. So we can go ahead and save that, and because of the fact that we set up the length, we open up our character, so for me that's BP third person character, and we set up the length to be our compare value. So if we go to Content, DPTS Assets, Selection Tables from Climb, and we're going to open up the Climb Transition Selection Table now. Go ahead and add a row. Inside of that row, we're going to add some elements. We'll just add one for right now. Now you'll see here that we have the same thing, the compare values, modification, and a name. Open up the modification action options though. We can see that we have a primary modification for this, which we did not have for climb jumps. And the reason is that if we open this up, you're going to see this is where the corner options are going to be. Now, just to give a kind of a simple example is if we were to take, let's say this item over here. I'm going to move this more over into our climbing space. Now I'm going to make a duplicate of it so that way I can kind of give like two different corner examples. So we've got this corner here, and then we got this here. Now, the way that I look at it, which is the way the system is created, is that this would be considered outer. I consider this going around the outer edge of the item. This I consider going into the inner edge of the item. So this is inner, this would be outer. And I'm saying this because this way you know what exactly to be able to match for the animations, because a lot of animations are tagged as corner inner, corner outer. But that doesn't mean that the naming conventions are always going to match. So I just want to make sure to point that out. So when you're under the primary modifications, anything that's set to inner for right or left is going to be kind of going from here to here in this little corner area in between the two objects. But anything that's going to be corner outer, right or left, is going to be kind of going around the outside of this area. Now, on top of being able to set the corners, you also see we have this disengage from state. Now, I want you to keep this in the back of your heads because we're going to come back to this after. But this is a way that we can use disengaging using animations instead of just falling off the area. Now, outside of those, we also have the input restrictions. These are good for helping to assign corners and various other transition types. And then we also have the state match restrictions, which just like with the climb jump, we have target and active that we can use to be able to match and restrict certain animation selections. So in this instance, we're going to be setting up a mantle. So I'm going to go to the state match restriction. For the target, I'm just going to create the index, but I'm going to leave it as none. And the active, I'm going to set to, whatever I would want it to be. So in this case, I'll go ledge climb full contact. And then we'll go under the input restriction here, and I'll set it to forward. So I have to press the forward key, when we're up, in order to actually do the action. And then for the compare values here, we'll go ahead and we'll add an index. I'm going to set this to be between 50 and 150, or actually 350. So this way it's, a longer area in order for it to take place. And if you were doing a mantle, it's basically the same setup that I had shown here. And you could use a different compare value to be able to make that selection. So it's a lot of the same that I've already shown already, just kind of changing some small various things. But if we go under now, you can see we have this climb up monkey montage here, which is the one that we had just set up. So there we go. So now we have a mantle and we have our selector set up. So if we go back to our character really quickly, click on the dynamic parkour tray system, secondary settings, and allowed actions, making sure that climb transition here is checked. Now, if we go ahead and compile, and what I'll do is I'll hit play and I'll jump on top of this sphere actor here because this is a ledge climb. Now, if I hit W and spacebar, you can see that he just does the mantle on top of it. So there we go. And again, you could use the same using that target point as a start, vaulting over, getting a landing target. You could do the same thing for vaults as well. But I just want to note that these climb transitions can be used in almost any way that you want. At one point, when I was really getting things set up and testing things out, I'm pretty sure I had about 50 actions between the jumps and transitions, between turnarounds, drops, and a whole bunch of different stuff. So go crazy. Do not think of this as a restricted system. This is just all you can use as many values as you want, the action modifications as you want, and just create this giant listing of selections to be able to create some really, really cool and unique parkour systems. Now, one other thing that I did want to note before we move into the next segment here is if I grab, let's say this cube here, I'm going to bring it down. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. And I'll add the tag here so that way it's actual climb area. So again, we'll just go with climb, and then we'll make this a type of ledge. So I just want to show you guys something about corners. When it comes to the corner system, if we come up on the area here, we move to the left, and then we just move to the right, you'll see that neither time did it actually trigger. We move to the left and to the right, there's nothing actually happening. No spheres are showing or anything. Now, the reason why is if we go into the parkour system, go to the dynamic parkour tray system details here, and then under the parkour state search options, you're going to want to open up where it says corner search state match. And we look at under the switches and modifications values, you're going to see auto corner. Now, by default, it is unchecked. So if I go up to this actor with that unchecked, and I go up to a corner and I press the space bar now, you'll see that there is a red and a yellow sphere, meaning that we have an initial and a height target. But if I were to, for example, check that auto corner option, set it to true, hit play, and I just go to that same area, and if I go over here, you'll see that we also now get those corners showing up. I'm not pressing the button, it's just automatically doing it. So that's first thing to note, is that you want to use the corners automatically. You're going to want to make sure that auto corner is checked. Now, outside of having auto corner, we also have the ability to restrict what type of climate styles or parkour types is going to evaluate corners at all. So under the parkour state search options here in the details panel for our parkour system, you're going to notice we have these index options with ledge climb, full contact. We also have ledge climb hang, as well as balance beam hang. So these are all the allowed options for corners, and this is just the default listing, but you can play around with this as you'd like. But just note that if the type of climbing or parkour state is not listed into here, it will not matter if you have auto enabled or not, because it will not even assess the corners. So you want to make sure that whatever you want corners to be traced on is in this listing. But other than that, you can go and set up corners using those 2 points where, like, for example, if you needed to like have him go around the area first, we could use that initial point and then get him to the height point. Another thing that's actually very important as well when it comes to corners is if we open up under the DPTS assets selection table and then the settings, just to open up the settings menu here, under the secondary settings here. So if you open up, for example, under the full climb, ledge climb, full contact options here, you're going to see there's this secondary use settings. Now under here, there's this corner target distance, which right now is set to 30. But if I set this to something like 80, for example, and I went to the corner and did the same thing that I just did before, where I go around, you can see that that yellow sphere is much farther away now. It's much farther down that area. You can use this value to actually set where the corner target distance is going to be, whether it be farther or closer to the initial distance. So you can use this to play around with things and make things, a little bit more direct for what you're trying to do as far as the final placement. All right, now the last thing I want to talk about is how to be able to disengage from climbing, and there's 2 ways that we can do that. But let's go ahead and take a look at the first way without using any animations. So if we go into our third person, blueprints, VP third person character, find some space in our graph. You can set this up off of any keybind input you want or combination, but I'm just going to use an arbitrary keybind for right now. So an easy way to do this is if I highlight the left shift and I Control D to duplicate it, go into the details panel here, I can hit the little keyboard icon and set this to whatever I want. So for example, if I wanted to set this to left alt, I just need to press it once that area has been highlighted. Now we're going to grab our parkour tray system here, we're going to pull off, and we're going to check a couple of things first. We're going to see if active parkour state, so we're going to get the active parkour state, anim equal to none. So if it's equal to none, then we don't really want to do this, right? Because we're setting up a keybind to be able to jump off of a climb area. So if that's true, do nothing. However, if it's false, meaning we're in a state, then we're just going to disengage from state, just like so. Now if a false, we'll plug that in, and you'll see there's a Boolean option here that says use animation. Now if we just compile, save, minimize, and we go to any of the climb actors here, I'll just run up on this one here. Now you can see we can move left, we can move right, but if I hit that left alt button, you'll see that he just immediately drops off the edge and we can go back into a running state. So this is one way that we can set things up. Another way that we can do this too though, is if we check the use animation box, we just need to get an animation now, which in my animations folder here, I do have this ledge fall down 180. So it starts from like a full contact state and just kind of drops down. So we'll go ahead and make this real quick with a right click, create the anim montage, and double click to open it up. Now this one is going to be set up a little bit different, which is why I wanted to show you guys the setup for this one. If we add just one notify track, and we're going to look at where he falls off the areas, something maybe like right about here, we're going to right click, add notify, and you're going to see this reset DPTS movement overrides. What this is going to allow you to do is be able to set a movement mode override, which in this case we'll set falling. We want to make sure to disable the constraint, so we're going to include the constraint, and we can set a gravity to 1.75 or whatever your project default is. Now bear in mind is that from a climbing state, your gravity is going to be 0. If you do not set a value into here, it's going to grab from whatever the active value already is. So when you enter into a climbing state, your gravity is set to 0. If you do not put anything into here, and we are already in a state, so like for example here, we're in a climb state, this value is not going to get anything, it's just going to be 0. So we want to make sure we set whatever your project's default is going to be for the gravity. And then we're also just going to go to the end here, add notify, and reset parkour action, set blend time around 0.2, And we're not going to check anything in the state control options because we're ending the climbing using this animation. And I might even go a little bit forward here so that way it actually kind of completes its rotation. So with no warps, no offsets, no nothing, we're just kind of telling it, okay, drop off the edge and then reset. So we go into our climb transition options here, or anim selector, I'm sorry. Add an element, go in and we'll put our montage in there where we just created by clicking on the little arrow icon here. Now we'll set a compare value, we'll leave it blank though, and in the action modifications here, we're going to go into the state match restrictions, and we're going to set the target as none, active is going to be the ledge climb full contact, and under the primary modification, we're going to make sure that disengage from state is checked. Or I'm sorry, selected, I should say. Now, just with that set up there, if we save, go back to our character, make sure that use animation is checked, which it already is. Perfect. And then we hit play. So now if I walk over to this item here, climb up it, and then if I press the Alt key, you can see that it shows the animation. However, we could probably select a better animation. The turnaround wasn't exactly the greatest, but we can always modify things and change certain things as we need. And again, this is just an example of what you can do. Realistically, utilizing a variety of the different options that you have at your disposal between the selections, you can probably set up a lot more different options when it comes to the ledge fall down. And the other thing is too, is that if we look in the BP third person character here, we've only set length here. So we could use another value if you wanted to be able to set, so 0 could be for length, but if we wanted like to get some other arbitrary value, then we could get that, such as velocity or something. I'm just kind of spitballing. Realistically, I mean, I know velocity would probably be useless in this instance, but my point being is that you can kind of do whatever you want as far as the values go. But there is a value we can use if you'd like, and under the transition here, if we pull off of the parkour system, if we get drop distance, you can use the drop distance value here if you would like as well, to assess from various types of drops. So in this instance, we might want to set a drop distance a little bit farther for this one, so that way he can reach his full rotation. But again, this is just an example of various ways that you can set things up. But the overall gist is pretty much the same. Just look at the target points, what do you want to assign, and then just let it go. So in this instance here, we now have the ability to climb up onto a target, we can move left and right, we can go up, and we can also climb up and we can go across these objects here between ledge, hang, and full contact. So we've got a lot of different things now that we've set up. And like I said, when it comes down to the action setup, you can do beam jumps, you can do so many things. And if you guys need more information, the detailed video showing all of the different actions and setup stuff shows a lot of this stuff. So if you guys get confused or have any more problems, just feel free to go check out that series. But if you continue to have problems, feel free to reach out to me on Discord. I'm always trying to be active and trying to keep an eye on things. So I will say I do keep an eye on the comments as well, but I am always more active in Discord. But that's really the gist of it, guys. We can disengage from climbing with a single option. We can go ahead and set animations to be used for it. We can use a bunch of different, connections and climb starts and different transition options and modification values and create combinations of different type of stuff. So there's a lot of things you can do into here, but this is really, like I said, it's kind of the base overview. From here, you can just start, setting up tags, setting up some blend spaces, add some, climb jumps and targets, and kind of play around with how things are work within the system. So there are going to be future videos coming out. I'm going to be doing a lot of videos kind of showcasing various ways that you can use the system. I will say at this point I need a break, so I'm going to probably be taking a break from videos for a couple of weeks, as I have not had a day off in it's probably been a few months now. And that includes weekends. Like, I haven't had a single day off in a few months, so I'm going to be taking some time away, and that's at the time of this recording, which is 11/6/25. So, if you're watching it later on, then this statement has no bearing on you whatsoever. Anyways, that's going to really close it out here, guys. So, and like I said, in the next videos, we're going to be covering various types of, setting up with NPCs and a whole bunch of other stuff. So it's going to be some cool stuff, but it's not going to be for a little bit down the road, just so that way I can give myself a little bit of a rest. I hope to see you guys in those videos, and I hope to see some cool stuff that you guys are going to be able to create using this system. So, feel free to post some stuff in the Discord as well. But until the next round, guys, that's going to close it out for now. But until then, stay tuned, and as always, stay animated.